We're back in the marquee that we've constructed here where all the auction cars are on display, and you can probably pick up quite a bit of noise behind us because there are cars out on track, and they started about 5 minutes ago and it's quite noisy. So hence these little furry mics that we're all wearing, and hopefully you can hear this okay. But we are here, we're very privileged actually. We have got ex-Formula One driver, sports car driver, team owner as well, artist. I'm going to miss something out, aren't I? Lots and lots of things, but we are joined by Stefan Johansson, who has very kindly come and joined us for this special Centenary auction that we're doing here this weekend. So thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
For taking the time to come and see us. I laughed a little bit
when... You're going to introduce me again, are you?
Yeah, I'm Peter
Terrible,
Warman.
he never does. I'm here, to your right.
I know. Got Peter Warman. We were just talking about Peter Warman's hair earlier, but anyway, we'll move on from that. So, Stefan, you have had lots of experience at this race circuit and lots of experience with the ACO. You actually had to buy some tickets to get in today, didn't you?
Well, I was okay, but I had a few guests that I was trying to help out who was a bit of a battle, you know, the sort of classic.
300,000 tickets. They sold out. I don't know.
Bit of bartering, bit of cash, bit of this, bit of that, and it sort of all worked out in the end.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, we're glad that you got all the passes eventually. Anyway.
Yeah.
But since you stopped racing, how often do you come to Le Mans?
I've been here actually, well, since the last time I actually raced here, which is, I think 2008 was my last race here. I've probably been here about 4 or 5 times since then even, I'm just with teams or, you know, old teams that I used to drive for or whatever, or done work for sponsors and things like that, so.
Are you one of these people that found, when you stopped racing, did you find it hard being in the environment as a spectator? I mean, because I know a lot of drivers feel that unless they're racing, they just don't want to be there. But you're not like that so much.
Well, I mean, when I decided to stop, finally, it was like just one moment from the next. I was on a plane back home from a race in Virginia in the States, and, you know, I just didn't do particularly great in the race, you know, and I just felt like, I think this is it. And I just literally decided there and then, that's it, done. And it's bizarre, but I just completely cleared my head of any desire to ever get back in a race car again. And it's kind of been the same ever since. So I never have the urge, you know, when I'm at the race here to get back, and I wish I was out there racing, you know, but because I'm sort of moved on to other things now, you know, and put my focus into other things that I've always neglected in my life beforehand, like my art, for example, and the sort of creative side I've always had, you know, but it's always kind of been, I've been pulled away by the racing all the time, you know, to really explore that fully. So, but, you know, I get enough of a dose, but for me, really, coming now, it's more about seeing all my old friends, you know, and because motor racing, it's a fantastic environment, really. It's it's a one big great family, you know, of like-minded people, and we're all pretty good people, you know. And I really love just going for this reason, you know, and see my old friends and hang out with the people that I enjoy being around, you know. And
I think as well, Stefan, that's what fuels this market as well. I mean, you're an artist. We know. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think. We were chatting at the Gulf Historic Grand Prix in Dubai last year, and I think I had 7 former Formula One champions there or something. I mean, but drivers at least. And it's that social side. But when you're buying into the collector's car world, the world of historic racing or racing in general, you're still meeting the manufacturers, you're meeting the people that design the cars, you're meeting the people that race the cars. And for people like Peter and I, who've been around cars our whole life, you're meeting basically the people you watched on TV and they were your heroes growing up. But you then get the privilege by we're fortunate in working in this business, but even ownership or racing at a classic event, the drivers are also friendly and so welcoming and love talking about their history of motorsport. And I don't think there's any other asset class that gives you that level of access to the people that made the sport what it is.
No, I think you're 100% right, you know, and it is that. And this world is full of really fascinating people, you know, from obviously the drivers is one thing, but you got the engineers, the designers, the team owners. I mean, they're all pretty interesting characters, every one of them, really, you know. I mean, it just draws a certain type of people, I think, that's fascinating in their own way. Once you understand a little bit their background, their history, and their story, it's a great environment to be in. It really is.
I don't know what you think, Peter. You've introduced this podcast before, not being able to remember what you've had for breakfast. We've had that conversation, but one thing I've noticed in meeting a number of drivers and people, retired drivers as well, they seem to in common have really good memories for their racing exploits, almost to the year, to the race, what the tyre pressures were.
Yeah.
It feels that, is that common in your experience as well?
Absolutely, yeah, very.
I wonder what it is about the brain.
Because we're so programmed and so disciplined because that's the key to success. You gotta. When you get in the car, as the car kind of moves on over the course of the weekend, even. At least in my case, you have everything memorized.
Yeah.
So, if you lower the ride heights on the front 1 millimeter, then you compensate maybe with a little bit stiffer rear bar, 2 clicks on the rear damper on the, all these things. And it's like, I can almost recall every race, I think, if you look, and even on the tracks, you go, you miss the bump by 2 inches, because under braking, because then all these little details, and I think every driver is the same.
Did you take it as a driver?
Must make for some pretty boring conversations in the paddock.
Yeah.
Remember the?
It is.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I always sympathise. When drivers get together for dinner with a group of people, it's we kind of on our own world, talking about all this stuff, and for the rest of them, it's like just gobbledygook.
All the drivers' wives glazing over.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah.
But did you take a lot of it as a driver in F1, in sports cars? Did you take a lot of interest in the technical side? Were you very engaged on the engineering and on the setup?
Very much so. Yeah. I think most guys are, to larger or smaller extent, but you have to be to a certain extent anyway, or at least back then, because there was very few tools available, so the driver information was very, very, very important, because that's a lot of the time that was the only thing the engineers had to go on, because you had no data, there was no sensors on the car, there was none of that, so. I remember.
Even so, Stefan, if you compare it to, say, racing, we're talking about Le Mans, we're talking about the Centenary, looking at the pre-war guys racing Bentleys in the 1920s, it was sort of tyre pressure and not much more, really, maybe ambient temperature and loading, how much fuel you had in the car, I guess. But I guess in your era, you really saw those changes and you went from tolerances down to really finite levels, and you have to understand it because the engineers will be saying to you, if we do this, it will make a difference. And as a driver, I guess, in order to believe that, you have to experience it, but you have to understand why.
100%. So, I think the big game changer obviously was aerodynamics. Once aero came into the picture, it totally changed the whole game. It just went to a whole new level, of importance of all these different aspects, because aero is by far the one factor of a race car that makes the biggest difference, on a lap time.
Yeah. And they don't always get it right, and I think Le Mans is testament to that. With
Le Mans in particular, there's been some experiments. I've driven some cars here with you lost your will to live after 3 laps. It's like just put me out of my misery.
Let's talk a little bit about that because and be great to touch on your Formula One career. Do people think of you mainly as a Formula One driver or as a sports car driver, do you think? I suppose Formula One has just got more profile, hasn't it? I suppose, but I don't know. How do you think, you were more years in total in sports cars than you were in Formula One?
I think as well, though, Peter, I think Formula One has always been more highly visible to the general public than sports car
absolutely,
racing. Whilst Le Mans,
the general public, for sure, Formula One is bigger, but the die-hard fans, sports car racing, I think, is equally important, if not more in some ways, because it's a bit more accessible and everything else.
Because you don't... I don't know how much reporting in a Swedish newspaper Le Mans would get. For years, you'd pick up the Sunday Times or something, and there'd be a little column talking about what happened at Le Mans, and there's 3 pages devoted to what happened in the last Grand Prix.
Absolutely. I think it's the same. Certainly in Sweden, it was the same. Yeah, but even Formula One hardly get any notice either. So.
But I generally, I mean, we're going to have a lot of fun over. We've got the auction tomorrow, but once we get that out of the way and enjoy this experience, I mean, for me as a spectator, watching Le Mans live, I don't think there's any better sporting experience. The atmosphere, the environment, and I think it's the one event where you can almost imagine yourself in the driver's position at 5 a.m. The sun's coming up. It could be raining. The lights on the circuit. It's silent, bar a few people having their final burger of the evening at 5 a.m. But the atmosphere here is tremendous. I mean, you've seen it both as a spectator.
It's extraordinary. I mean, there is no other event like it. I mean, there really isn't. I mean, there's other 24 races, but Le Mans it has all the elements that makes it so great. The track is way faster than any other racetrack in the world, really, still to this day, which obviously adds to the sort of that magic thing about it, but it's just the whole aura, like you said, you'd be out there, even as a driver, when you're out there, when the sun comes up, the air is nice and crisp, and it's like romantic in a way, it's just an unbelievable feeling, even as a driver.
The 24 hours, even, back in normally aspirated engines, I guess they even perform different throughout different times of the day. I mean,
100%. And lap times are always quickest, like right when the sun comes up in the morning, You
got
the air is crisp, and
Interesting.
Yeah, that's happy hour.
Yeah.
That's when all the quick lap times. The fastest lap of the race is normally around that time.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And if you can manage, to get one clear lap, that's when you're going to set the time,
And you're enjoying it at that point. You've got absolute confidence in the car, and
absolutely, yeah. You're in the groover then. You've had a few stints to get the nice rhythm going, and because Le Mans is a tough track because it's really. It takes a while to wrap your head around the place. Every year you come back, it's not like any other track. You get dialed in 3 laps. You're pretty much on the limit. Here. It's tough, because it's so fast and it's flowing corners. Even the chicanes, you can gain or lose a second in every chicane, but you got to let the car roll, and it's just a lot of different technical things here that you have to consider that you don't necessarily do on other tracks.
Well, I guess as well, it's the speed differential between the Group C's and the prototypes and the GT class is another class. It's so huge.
And that's what I'm saying with it. Like literally in 24 hours. In all the races I've done here, I mean, if you get one clear lap the whole race, like a fully clear lap, that's normally your lot,
Yeah.
I mean, because you have the delta on the dash, to if you plus or minus the quickest lap time, so you string it all together, yes, 2/10 first chicane. So you're down like 0.8, by the time you get to the Porsche curve. And then there's a GT3 sitting there parked in the middle of it. Damn it, so let's start again, try again. Yeah. And it's like that every stint.
And that's what keeps the focus, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. Think of it as a corner.
We've got a bit of an interruption going on here.
At that speed, it's definitely a corner. Oh, hello there.
Sorry, no, don't get up.
I was just telling you how I passed Derek, on the outside.
He claims to have the fastest time down the
We have
Morsard
to come in
Square.
occasionally and talk about the truth, don't we? Make sure, because he's such a bullshitter. He goes up with all this stuff. It's great. Thank God we have people like him around. And he likes us around.
Yes, exactly.
He's an honestly good guy.
Likewise.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's always a pleasure to see you there.
I'm not sure what it's the backside of, but it looks like it was painful.
Yeah, he's here to sell the art, Derek. What do you do in your spare time?
Nice bit of art, actually.
Yeah, well, thank you.
That's bit of your art. That's your work. I know. I couldn't believe that you do that.
You've got a little bunny with crossbones on your shirt there. What does that signify?
Do you know that I was a mug and paid too much money for the shirt?
Yeah, exactly.
So, gents, you're both here. Tell us about the Centenary of Le Mans. I mean, what are we gonna what are we gonna see here? We've got Ferrari back, we've got Porsche back, we've got Cadillac back in the event. Who's your money on?
I put it.
That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I mean, I think it could be any of them, really. Sit in my lap. You want to sit in my lap?
We're grabbing a chair.
No,
We're grabbing a chair.
The way I look at it is this, and he did it 100 times.
Well
I've done it. He did it. I'll start again. Sorry, kids, I won't be long.
No, we don't want to keep you.
That's
really
all right.
grateful just
That's
for a
all right.
quick.
No, it's all right. When you see him, you
hello.
have to have a laugh. I mean, it's an opportunity to have a laugh.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Because not many guys laugh about their careers. We have to.
Carry on?
Exactly.
Oh, we're going to keep going. We can keep going. This is all in the podcast.
Okay.
It's fine.
No, if I may say something, having done it more times than him, I worked with a guy called John Wire, who I thought was one of the greatest statisticians of long distance racing, and he won it with not one Le Mans with Astons, but he did very well. And then of course he won it with the GT40, and then he basically ran it with a 917. So he knows about and the Mirage. So he knows about how to go about it. And they always say it takes 3 years to win Le Mans with a new formula or with a new car. So of course you're going to say, well, it's all new now. It isn't totally new, but it's largely new. But the guys that have been in there for the last 3 or 4 years, and that begins with a T, from what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
They have done the groundwork, and they have got something that the others haven't got. Porsche have got it, but it's 3 years ago. And so, and John used to say it'll take you 3 years to win Le Mans. I don't say that, but it's a pretty good rule to go by. When Bentley came in at the beginning of the 2000s, I never said that because I wouldn't be so stupid, but it took them 3 years. The first year they finished, the second year they did really well, and the third year they won.
Well, it's interesting you mention, of course you're both too young to have raced in 1965 here, but it's interesting you mentioned John Wire and the GT40s, because everyone will know the sort of Ford versus Ferrari due to the film. We're selling the starting flag from 1965, first lot of the auctions.
Oh really? Oh wow.
Which is just hanging over there, and that's going to be that's the last year that Ferrari won here. With the 250LM, and of course now they're coming back to race again. So it's really...
I mean, they look. I mean, I looked to the younger. Talked to one of my sons this morning, and he said, it could be Ferrari, and it could be. I mean, we both had he had a wonderful time at Ferrari. Really, I mean, anybody that raced at Ferrari and won Grand Prix was bloody good. And he didn't always win that many because the car wasn't capable of winning that many. But the drivers are all capable of doing it. That's the point. And, again, Ferrari, I don't know what 24-hour tests they've done, but there's nothing like coming out in this heat and doing it right here.
Well, I think we talk a lot with Formula One today about technology versus driver and how much the driver really plays a role. And I don't mean to be disparaging about modern Formula One drivers, but I imagine a circuit like this is a great leveler, because in spite of the technology, you've got to drive through the night, the conditions are going to change, the drivers have to be alert for all of that time, and I guess that must play a big role in this. You can make a mistake much easier in a 24-hour race.
Well, I think that's the difference,
race.
To be here in the race than doing a 24-hour test, for example, because really what it comes down to here is the racecraft. And the traffic is horrific here, and that's the big factor, one of the big factors. And obviously looking after the car and, doing all the other things. But really, the big differentiator here is the track itself, and also the traffic is really a big deal.
What do you think is the balance for a victory? You obviously got to find a balance between all-out pace and getting the car to the end, and because obviously history tells us that fabulously fast cars with great drivers just don't make it through 24 hours. So how do you find that balance? I mean, what are you being told to drive at 80%? I mean, it's not that.
The cars are so good now that you can drive them absolutely on the limit the whole time. Brakes, clutch, all that stuff. But you can't always control the reliability, but it's not. Like back in the day with these cars, for example, you had to be pretty gentle on them, didn't you?
Yeah.
With the gearbox and everything.
You did, because you just think today. Well, I'll go back with these. We got two hands on the wheel, and every time you come to a corner, your hand comes off. You go down on the brake and the clutch, and you're down to a gear. Right? You're not going to go fifth, fourth, third, second. You're going to go miss out fifth to third to second.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you do over a period of time, and you're braking, and your hand's off the wheel, so the control you have is restricted but to one hand.
Yeah.
You do that. These guys today, they just sit there like this. They go bang, 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 and it goes down.
Yeah.
And so physically, it's less physical in that respect than we had. But of course, they are going tremendously fast around the corners. But as he knows, these cars had ground effect that Formula One hadn't got when we raced them, and that's why at Le Mans they had to restrict the ground effect and take it away and say we're going to. I mean, I went and did a test, as I think I mentioned to you before, with the short tail at Le Mans, and the first time I went down the straight, he went bang, and the whole bloody floor fell off.
Oh, really?
It sucked the floor off the car like that.
But you both raced in an area where I guess we've seen the greatest technological advances in aero and tyres and all of that. I guess.
Well, electronics too.
Electronics as well. You've lived through that entire change.
Yeah, I mean, we had in the period of that car, Porsche. Sorry, again, have a philosophy that I used to moan sometimes and say, why have I got this special gearbox, PDK? It hasn't proved to be doing anything more than a 500-mile race. And we're going to go 24 hours, isn't that crazy? And they said, but every race has to be the development of something. They have to justify their budget of racing, like the cars that are here with Porsche on. Their development still now to justify their budget that comes from the board. Hence the whole board of Porsche are going to be here to watch what happens. And it's going to be bloody tough. But we developed, as you just started to mention, electronic fuel injection. We then had PDK, double clutch transmission, which is now every damn car in the world has double clutch transmission. And of course, then we went to ABS. I mean, everything is, and of course, all the electronics that ensued with that. So the work that was done by the racing programs was immense at that time.
Even fitness. I mean, from your perspective, we think about drivers. You talk about James Hunt and whatever he had for breakfast, which I think most people know.
We had it during the race. What do you call it?
During the race, exactly.
Didn't we? Oh no, you didn't. Nor did I.
But okay,
serious.
What did that help with exactly?
Too serious.
You were too serious to have breakfast during the race. Okay. Yeah. So I'm curious. So pre-chicane or post-chicane, how would you like to be if you were driving here today?
It was less physical before, more worrying.
Yeah.
But how many times did we have anything go wrong?
Yeah, not many really. I mean, but you always sat there waiting for something to go wrong, didn't you? I mean, literally, you just like waiting for a tire to blow up or something.
I guess you have to.
And you always got that crown in the road, so the car is sort of walking all over the place, and it's
But no, I mean,
the kink was definitely
was
a bit of a number back then,
But the 917, we were doing 246 miles an hour. 396 kilometers. I mean, it's just amazing when you think back in 71 in something like that. But it would, believe me, it was so easy to drive. You got in it, turned the key, and it started up, and off you went.
Have you driven a 917 in anger?
Not in anger, no. I drove it actually just a few years ago at Laguna Seca.
Right.
But never in a real situation.
I remember Montoya looked.
Thankfully, I would have to say.
I mean,
yes, but when it was the only car out there, it was going to win for you.
You thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread back then, of course.
917 because they knew they could win.
Anecdotally, people say people doing the opposite. Saying I don't want to drive that thing. It was a real.
It was only I drove, fortunately, and he drove the car that was the finite product. The last car that came off was a bloody good car, and it handled. I mean, I didn't know any different because my first year. I get in it, I go, this is all right, and we win a few races, and we go to Le Mans, and Norbert says, how many revs you're pulling, and I said 8.1, and he said, oh, that's good because at 8.2 it blows up. I thought, bloody good for the Germans. I mean, they got it right. If it was a Ferrari, they say wait for the valves to bounce and then shift gear,
Exactly,
And I mean, we didn't win the race, but and Longtail did win. And they built it to do the job, and that's what everybody has to do. But it was dangerous, of course. But I knew. I mean, you get up to top speed basically by les zones d'air, and you got the second half. You're just sitting there at the peak revs all the way along, all the way along like this.
And you're heavily reliant on your technology at that point, aren't you?
Exactly.
Really, for sure.
Wind tunnels weren't that sophisticated, or in many cases none at all. They just came up with, this looks about right. Some new great idea, and suddenly you can do this with the steering halfway down the Mulsanne.
It's got a little light at the front.
Well, I mean, it was tufts of wool, wasn't it, stuck to a car? That was how you would watch the airflow.
And they ran oil down the bodywork.
Ran oil as well.
No, it's changed dramatically, but they weren't once they got it right. If you can say, but who's going to get it right? But once you got it, it was fine to drive because the loadings on a 917, for example, weren't that great. I mean, the loadings on this downforce on these was much greater.
And in fact, it's one of the most remarkable things that you would have imagined in the context of the time would have created more of a problem, but it didn't seem to. It was tire tech. Because tire technology then was pretty rudimentary. Wasn't it? And you start putting all of that downforce at that speed through these tyres.
I remember one day we were testing somewhere here, or we'd been testing at the end of the first day. I remember the guys from, well, I won't mention the manufacturer, he said, we were talking about, do the tyres, do they expand, during, and he said, if you came and saw, what do they put it in, where they test them? It's a barrel or something? Anyway, they test them in some setup back at the factory, the tyre manufacturer. They said, if you could see the way that tyre gets out of shape at top speed, you'd never drive the bloody car.
Yeah. Well, I guess as well, I mean, this is a road circuit. I mean, Mulsanne Straight, which is obviously, we know that's not its official name, Undia.
Les Undia.
But not long before the race starts, the public are driving on that road, particularly in the old days.
Absolutely.
And I guess when you're hammering down there at 240 miles per hour, you must worry that it's clean.
You just get,
or you don't think that. I mean, there must be debris and...
The race has been there 100 years now. And 30 odd years ago, 40 years ago, you just got in a car and you drove as quick as you could. You never thought about the dirt on the road or the bits of bodywork. I mean, of course, you went to avoid bodywork. You were frightened to do that.
You were thinking about
But you wanted to win the race. That was the point. And you often used to think, well, maybe the car will break, maybe the wheel will come off at the hairpin.
Yeah.
There's not a big accident. But if you thought that this is going to happen at 240 mile an hour, you probably wouldn't do it.
Both of you, different eras obviously, but you both were in sports cars, having been very fresh in Formula One as well, in Grand Prix racing. I mean, did sports cars feel more or less dangerous than the single seaters at that time?
Tim, he drove much more.
Yeah.
Didn't you?
Well, in a way, yes, because Formula One's sort of always been the leader in, let's say, safety, both on the track and the cars. So, back in the 80s, which was my sort of era in F1, we looked at the previous generation of cars and sort of said, thank God we didn't drive those things.
That's right.
And you look at the 80s car now.
Sure.
I know.
Head sticking out of the cockpit,
I know. I saw
feet are like in front of the front wheels, but it's carbon chassis, and it was all this.
When you get in
one, they were
which he's
super
done
safe,
more recently than me.
Yeah. But
I mean, if you look, so we're talking about the Centenary, 100 years of this, I think the greatest race on the planet. But it has to be up there in the top 5 greatest sporting events on the planet, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly as a motor racing fan. Is there an era that you think, I would have quite liked to have had a go at that? Would it be 180 miles an hour in a D-type, or would it been, the Bentleys and the fun that went with that, or the perceived fun? Obviously, 917 is a great era. Yeah. This is another great era. But is there one area you think, well, if I was alive then, I'd love to have had a go? Or raced against another particular driver? I don't know. Maybe there's someone that you really...
I actually think I was lucky enough to be in the best era of Formula One in the 80s with the turbos.
Yeah, of course.
Because those things were just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 1,600 horsepower in qualifying with the Ferrari. The cars were just mental. I mean, it was, at Monza in qualifying, which is a very long track, with long gear, you had wheel spin in every gear. Even with one lap qualifying. Wow, it was just like, it was crazy, these cars.
It's really brave, but they're really brave.
But I mean, it was the ultimate of like what you can experience as a driver, I think,
But everybody would want to do that. I would love to have driven it, not because it was the best.
Yeah.
Like he wanted to drive a 917 or a 962 because it was the best. Because you're going to experience the best that car manufacturers can produce.
Well, obviously, Derek, you've done a little bit with Bentley as well, and you've driven the pre-war Bentleys as well. I mean, do you still enjoy that, or is it just...
They were heroes. I mean, I was in one this morning, actually, down in the village. And I mean, the steering is heavy, got this big wheel, and I mean, they're animals, and the guys that drove them were absolute heroes, but they weren't doing more than 100 miles an hour. But I've been... I agree.
I mean, like Fangio and those guys, when I don't know if you've seen that, there's an onboard video of Fangio at Nürburgring.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how they fit, but I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, I mean, it's just insane what he was doing with his car,
I drove an ERA or a Maserati 250 F1, something like that, some years ago on a twisty track. And of course, they're not going at the same top speeds that we were going. But they're so drivable. The old tail comes out and you just got a bit of opposite lock. The thing is, it's when it does something you didn't want it to do. That's
Well, even the Bentley era, in that early days, driving through the night, the lights must have been absolutely horrific.
But they didn't know any better, did they?
No, quite.
I mean, the lights we even had on these weren't really good compared to what they have today.
No.
I'm going to have to go.
Derek, so kind of you to make that spontaneous
Sorry,
Good to
visit.
see you, Derek.
Sorry to come in and chat.
No, it's good.
Took the pressure off.
You'll be back to bid on this car, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you,
Derek.
Derek.
All right, nice to see you. Take care.
Nice to see you.
Excuse me.
And so you mentioned, Stefan, earlier, we were talking about when we did a podcast at Sotheby's and we held that 300 plus carat diamond after you dropped the blue diamonds on the floor, which we and we talked about the energy from that stone, and you carry a crystal in your pocket, so obviously you're a very spiritual person.
Well, David and I are on the same planet in that one, aren't we?
Is that right?
Yeah,
okay. So, well,
I
think that's great to hear. But I mean, is that something that's evolved much more since you stopped racing, or did racing almost inspire that? Because of, obviously, as you've just described,
I think
you were
it
faced
did.
with some
The racing
difficult
definitely inspired it a
situations.
little bit too, you know, trying to dig deeper into, like, sort of bring out the best of yourself as well, you know, and just kind of that connection with, you know, whatever it is that's out there, you know. I always meditated, you know, from quite a young age, and I always felt that helped me a little bit, you know, to just kind of get into that space I needed to be when I get in the car, you know.
We now have David Brabham with us, who was sort of just passing through the auction building and has just come and joined us. So that's amazing. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We've found a wonderful
Always good
comment,
to talk.
old teammates and obviously great buddies too. But it comes back to what we were saying earlier, Peter. That's, I think, the beauty of being involved for us professionally from an auction house point of view. It's just such a wonderful experience to meet the guys that raced the cars, that built the cars, that designed the cars, and of course 300,000 odd fans here as well. It's tremendous, and I think
I agree.
it's testament to the camaraderie that we've always known to exist within the motor racing fraternity. The families that holiday together and
One
everything
big
else.
family, really. That's
It
what
is.
it is, you know.
That's why it's so nice coming back here, seeing all these people that you were part of the family when you were racing.
And I think as well, I mean, that's what we hope to achieve here this weekend. You can buy into it. You know, the facilitation of running a car like the 962 behind us at the Le Mans Classic is there. You can run these cars today, and you know, if you've got the money to do so, you can race against you guys as well. You know, and that is a great joy. I mean, you're not going to get in the boxing ring or play with Muhammad Ali or play tennis against John McEnroe. But if you get into
I'd like to see you do that.
well.
And the bonus in all of that is that Stefan will do a painting for you as well.
Well, quite, I mean, we're familiar with Stefan's Stefan's art.
Well, David's actually wearing one of my watches too.
Hey!
Yeah, specially made for him. That's special design.
Is that real? That's a one-off, is it? So you designed the
So yeah,
dial?
I do. Yeah.
We designed the face. The face is actually if you can't really see it, but if you get the right angle, you'll see the world. So when I raced, I didn't have an Australian flag or a British flag. I always tried to race with a flag of the world.
Right.
So, and that was mainly to do with think about the planet, think about humanity. You know, that was, we're from the same place. That was my philosophy. I didn't care where you were from. So that's how, and on my helmet. So when I won Le Mans, I went to Steph and we had a chat about it. And I put the world on there, and on the back is a piece of the winning car as well.
Look, I mean, Peter, we're here for our auction. We're at Le Mans in the Centenary year, and we've had 5 times win, and we've got 2 former Le Mans winners as well. I mean, what a privilege. I feel very humbled, I have to say.
I know.
All we've got to do is get people to buy some cars. I mean, hopefully that will
Exactly, yeah.
I'm sure
There are some stunning cars here.
Yeah.
Stunning
Fantastic cars. Yeah, absolutely.
I see one that 93 Jaguar XJ220. That brings back memories of being on the podium, but it also brings painful memories of when the car dropped on my foot in the warm-up and it swelled up so much I couldn't put a race shoe on. So I ended up having to race with a running shoe, and when I hit the brake, instead of hitting it like that, I had to hit it on the side using the rubber to take the load off. And it was super painful, I can remember. And I saw John Nielsen, who was my teammate just earlier,
Oh yeah.
And we were talking about it because John built like, he was a big, solid guy. And he'd say, "How's David's foot?" He said, "Shall I do another stint?" Yeah, do another stint, mate. So.
But you wouldn't have wanted to make that excuse to the team owner, would you? So I'm a second down on my lap time because my foot hurts.
Well, luckily my pace was okay, but that one, and also when we had a fuel leak in the car too, and they actually I was driving around and the fumes was getting stronger and stronger, and I radioed to say, "Hey, look, I think I've got a bit of a fuel leak here. I'm getting a headache and fumes." And they said, "Well, you've got a few laps before the end of the stint. Can you keep going?" So I said, "Okay, I'll keep going." So I finished the stint, came in, they filled it up, and they leant in and they said, "Look, we see what the problem is. Can you go and do a few more laps so we can figure out what to do?" I said, "No way. It's not what exactly I said. I said it in a slightly other way." And there was fuel coming out underneath the car, underneath the floor, and my feet were slipping. That's how much fuel was on there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
and that will go through the boots.
They changed the tank.
And burn your skin, and it's not just a question.
I mean, if that had gone up, that was
it's nasty. I've had that happen too.
We had Derek here earlier as well, Derek Bell, and we've been chatting with Stefan. But obviously, centenary year of Le Mans. I think it's a new era of sports car racing, endurance racing, with Ferrari coming back, Porsche, Cadillac re-entering the frame, and I'm sure they're not just doing this as a one-off for the centenary. They've come back and they mean business.
I think the regulations play a key role in all of that. When manufacturers get confidence in stability in the rules, and it aligns with their technologies that they're bringing to market as well.
Sure.
It makes sense. And we've been around sports car racing a lot to see lots of different cycles. All the manufacturers come in, they're there for a while, then it rests on the privateers, and then it picks back up again. We're definitely seeing another massive.
It's the first time we've seen now for quite a while the level of commitment from so many different manufacturers at the same time. Because typically here at Le Mans in particular, you have 2, maybe 3 that's fully committed, right? I mean, now we got, there's a pretty strong feel. I mean, you see the commitment when you go into the paddock and the garages. I mean, it is pretty impressive.
Well, it's always, sports cars, and a bit like rallying, for the big manufacturers, it's historically always been easier for them to, join the dots between what they're doing on track and what people are buying in showrooms. Whereas Formula One, that's always been a little bit tenuous. So one of the reasons why it's more difficult for Formula One to engage with manufacturers in quite the way that you can with sports cars. Not that these have got very much to do with what you go and buy in a showroom.
Well,
but,
how's your business, David? Your car, how's that progressing?
Yeah, obviously we launched in 2018.
Yeah, we were together at Hampton Court, I think.
That's right. No, absolutely. And we've got one of the first road versions of that going on the road in New Zealand very shortly, and one in Germany in a few months' time as well. So, and I have to say that's been quite a challenge for the guys to get a race car with a number plate in Germany. You know what I mean? So a lot of work's been going on in the background, and also developing a new GT2 car for the future as well.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. We've taken a lot of your time. Thank you ever so much. So thank you very much. A slightly unusual episode of the car show, but thank you very much to David Brabham, Stefan Johansson, Derek Bell, Peter Warman, and you. It was nice to be mentioned in that company, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
But thank you very much indeed.